For those of you who haven't had a chance to meet the ambassador yet, might come forward and...
The primary work of a consulate is to issue visas. But consulates also gather the political information Ambassador Gordon must have to gauge the temper of a nation larger in area than the United States. At City Hall, the decision is made. Mayor Shez will receive Ambassador Gordon. 5 minutes before he arrives, the red carpet is still being laid. At the head of the stairs is a plaque with a quotation from former President Getulio Vargas. Work is the major factor in the elevation of human dignity. Mayor Sereno Shez is 35, the youngest in Porto Alegre's history. Shez is on the political hot seat, under threat of suspension from office, because he supported Goulart's military defense. In the weeks ahead, the threats will turn to action. He will be removed as mayor and lose political rights. At the same hour, Mrs. Gordon and the women visit a local orphanage. Mrs. Gordon speaks Portuguese, but still takes lessons at the embassy. She is admired as her husband's gracious counterpart in diplomatic necessities. But Mrs. Gordon would prefer less formality on these trips. She likes to look around on her own. The Brazilian army thrives on its reputation of only moving into politics to protect the Constitution. It's happened 3 times since 1955. A new commanding general controls the area. His predecessor backed the wrong political horse and is now in exile across the border with Goulart. The ambassador's reception at the country club is the major event of the Porto Alegre social season. The country club has 600 members. 10 are American. It looks and feels like suburbia anywhere. The club was founded in 1930 by horseback riders and golf players. When 9 new holes were added to the golf course, the equestrians moved somewhere else. They have been replaced by card players. The morning after, an early visit to the University of Rio Grande do Sul. The campus resembles an American college, with one major difference. Secret political police, known locally as DOPS, are on guard. Their presence inhibits tough questions. The president of the student body was in jail a few nights ago. He favored Goulart. Ambassador Gordon wins his audience immediately by calling the university the Harvard of Brazil. This is the climax to a cycle of events that began last year. The graduating class of the School of Architecture invited President Kennedy to be its sponsor, a sort of academic godfather. This was a public challenge to the architecture faculty, dominated by anti-American leftists. President Kennedy accepted and designated Ambassador Gordon to represent him. But commencement day in December fell within the period of mourning after the assassination. The trip continues 350 miles west to the town of Uruguayana. In the 18th century, this was a battleground between Spanish and Portuguese. In the 19th century, Brazil and Argentina continued the fight. This area looks like Texas, rich in livestock, horses, and, for the ambassador's party, mud. There is no diplomatic immunity for this situation. Ambassador Gordon is at this fazenda for a weekend of rest. Fazenda is the Portuguese word for ranch. Fazenda also means finance, because in Portuguese colonial days, the huge ranches were basic units of wealth. This is gaucho country, or as the Brazilians say it, gaúcho. The ranch hands have a mixture of Spanish, Portuguese, and Indian blood. The bolo is the local lasso. It spirals around the cattle's legs and spills them in their tracks at branding time. Brazil's answer to the LBJ barbecue, the churrasco. Even here, Ambassador Gordon meets the local press. A churrasco has all the appearance of good-hearted fun, but it's a test of diplomatic endurance, similar to the multiple vodka toasts of the Russians. It all begins simply enough. The gourd contains a delicious fruit-flavored Brazilian tea called mate. What follows is barbecued beef, barbecued lamb, and barbecued ranch sausage. It's all accompanied by local beer, local whiskey, and local wine. The vineyards are in the Italian tradition, though the wines are a little thinner than in the old country. This beef is served cold and still has the hide on it. The acid test of diplomacy. After the churrasco, Ambassador Gordon speaks about personal and political matters. Did the actual timing of the revolution come as a surprise at all?
Well, yes, we didn't. It's one thing to feel a lot of tension. It's another thing to have a specific military action. We, as you well know, we had nothing to do with the planning of this thing. We are generally fairly well informed, which it is our business to be. And it was not hard for us to sense that something explosive was in the air. But we had no advance notice that this military movement would come down in this way from the state of Minas Gerais at that particular moment. And neither we nor, I think, most Brazilians, including most of the planners with whom we've had many conversations since, believed that it would be over in less than 48 hours without any bloodshed to speak of and without any significant resistance. This was a welcome surprise.
Many Americans and some Brazilians believe that the United States government played a part in overthrowing the Goulart government. Is it possible for the United States, with such great influence and interest in Latin American affairs, to be completely uninvolved in such a situation?
Well, uninvolved in the sense that we had nothing to do with the organization of forces or action which led to the overthrow. It is perfectly possible, and it was a fact. Uninvolved in the sense that we're unaffected by it, obviously not. We are affected. Our relations are very, very close, and they involve all kinds of aspects of the national life here and at home as well. So in that sense, and that sense alone, we were very much affected, as indeed our relations are affected by the outcome. But involved in the other sense, fact is that we weren't. I have heard, starting at least a year ago, predictions that such a revolution would take place with deadlines given to me at least 20 times. Deadlines usually 2 weeks off or 4 weeks off or 6 weeks off. And this intelligence that was picked up, which happened to be true in this case, may just have been one of those many predictions. In fact, I'd heard it so often that I was beginning to wonder whether it was a wolf cry that would never come off. as in the famous story.
Did you advise President Johnson to recognize the new Brazilian government as quickly as he did?
Of course.
In connection specifically with the rapidity with which it was recognized?
Yes. The action that was taken by President Johnson was in response to a specific recommendation we made on Thursday afternoon, late Thursday afternoon, April 2nd. But obviously it was taken only after the recommendation was considered by his own advisors in Washington.
Would you comment on the outlook for the Alliance for Progress here in Brazil and throughout Latin America?
Much more has to be done, and it has to be done much more systematically, and that requires a cooperative federal government. We have every prospect of a cooperative federal government, which is much interested in this, and I naturally hope that this will be true not only of the present interim government, but of whatever succeeds it. The candidates who are most in view, or have been most in view, have all told me personally that they're most interested in this kind of collaboration if they get into office.
Ambassador Gordon, a good deal has been said of the rigors and economic hardships and dangers of government service. Did you have any hesitations or reservations about accepting an ambassadorial post? Yes. I, in fact, found that financially it would have been impossible for me to take a post as Assistant Secretary of State. I was asked to take 2 or 3 before I accepted this job, because with 4 children, most of them in university, college, or graduate school at the time, I would have lost several $1,000s a year, and I don't have several $1,000s a year to lose. Many of my friends who've come from academic life into the government these last few years have in fact suffered that kind of loss. Would you look forward to a lengthy career in government service, or do you have the desire to get back into academic life? I shall be happy to go back, I think, at an appropriate time. I don't know when the appropriate time will be. I suppose it will depend on the particular opportunities that come along. I do regard Harvard as my basic home in both spiritual and physical senses. We have very many friends there. And I found that the intermittent going back and forth between academic life and government services has, for me, contributed a good deal to both. That is, in the academic years, I've been able to learn about the theoretical side of things and systematize the kind of knowledge which, in a particular job, one picks up. Do you find more satisfactions as an ambassador or serving in other governmental posts? Being an ambassador, of course, is rather being on one's own. Of course, one's responsible to the Secretary of State, the President, and the other authorities in Washington, but one does have a very important personal responsibility. Now, that for me is new. I've had executive responsibility, but always as a middle level, or later an upper middle level, later an upper level, but never the chief of a particular department or agency. Well, here there are the additional satisfactions, provided that the results are meaningful and positive, a feeling that one has an area of responsibility of one's own, and both the challenge and the opportunity to make good use of it. The visit is over. Ahead lie the day-to-day problems of the embassy and the special challenge presented by Brazil's 1965 presidential election. One anti-American campaign slogan making the rounds is "Lincoln Gordon in 65. It expresses the belief of some Brazilians that Latin America is run from Washington. This is a hazard of diplomacy. Giving advice and encouragement to friendly governments also creates enemies and provides a political target. Mr. Ambassador,